Welcome back to another video, and today we got our Week 14 College Football Top 25 Rankings video. We're doing these college football videos every single Tuesday, so if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe now. I'm going to be honest with you guys, this video is going to be a little bit tough for me to record, maybe a little bit tough to follow along. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. Pretty much, I'm out of town right now, so I was not able to record, so I have not seen any of the Week 13 games. None of the games from this past Saturday. So these rankings are just going to be off of the Week 13 selection committee rankings. So I haven't seen, like I said, any result. So I'm going to do my best to kind of predict what happened the week before, base my predictions this week off of that. It is rivalry week, and it does suck that I'm not going to be able to know some of these outcomes because some of them are going to be pretty important. But honestly, there's not too many games from last week that were that big. We'll get into the big ones. But yeah, I'm going to try my best. Obviously, I'm going to predict every single rivalry week game. We're also going to break down some playoff scenarios. So let's just jump right in. Try to make it as as little confusing for you guys as possible. I'm actually going to go ahead and drop a number 26 team. By the way, the up and down arrows are going to be based off my rankings last week, so last week's video. So I had James Madison at 24. They're not inside the playoff committee's top 25, which I thought was very interesting. James Madison's definitely a team you guys need to watch if you're only paying attention to the top 25. Definitely tune on in to James Madison. I think they have a real shot to get into the playoffs. Right now, the highest rated group of 5 team is Tulane. I think North Texas is right there with the American. Obviously, you have teams like South Florida and Memphis. We'll dive into the American in a second here. But James Madison's still very much alive. Depending on what happens in the American, there's a good chance James Madison still could get in as the Group of 5 team in the playoffs. So I'm going to keep them in here just for the fun of it. Obviously, I didn't know what happened last week. I'm assuming they won against Washington State. They're a pretty heavy favorite. Against Coastal Carolina, I do think they win here. It is on the road. Could be a little bit tricky. Coastal's actually not too bad this year, but I do think James Madison gets the win. Now let's move in to the playoff committee's rankings based off last week's, not this week, last week's rankings. Number 25 is going to be Arizona State. They were not ranked in my top 25 last week. They're sitting here. I'm assuming they won against Colorado. They're favored by 7.5 here. This is kind of like a placeholder team. There's not much hope for Arizona State. Obviously, they can't get into the playoffs with 3 losses. I don't know. This game against Arizona, though, Friday, should be a pretty good one. 7-3 versus 7-3. I mean, it could very well be 8-3 versus 8-3. Arizona has a very winnable game, or had a very winnable game against Baylor last week. I'd assume they win that game. So it could be 8-3 versus 8-3 here. I don't know. It should be a fun one. Noah Fifita versus Sam Levitt. I like this. I think, honestly, whoever was at home in this one, I probably would have taken. I'll take Arizona State. I think these two teams are pretty close, pretty comparable. I am a little higher on Arizona State, but it is going to be very close, obviously, because it is such a big rivalry. Number 24 is going to be Tulane. Here's where I kind of want to take some time to dive into the American as of right now, as a conference as a whole. So Tulane, I'm assuming they won against Temple. I'd expect them to win. Temple's 5-5 on the season right now. So after that game, I think Tulane would be 9-2 right now. There's currently 4 teams in the American Conference tied with 1 loss, and I don't think any of them play each other. Yeah, none of these teams play each other. The 4 teams at the top: Navy, Tulane, North Texas, and East Carolina. So barring anything crazy, all 4 of those teams probably should have won. I think they're all favored in their matchup this week, or this past week. So should be kind of an interesting spot here. Who gets in to the American Conference Championship? I'm not really sure at this point. Tulane should be in the driver's seat, however. Like I said, they're the current 12 seed in the committee's rankings. So they'd be representing the group of 5 right now. And they actually have a pretty solid resume when you look at it. They got wins against Northwestern, wins against Duke. Those are both pretty solid wins there. You do have losses against Ole Miss and a kind of a bad loss against UTSA, but honestly, the Ole Miss loss, I wouldn't take much from that. Ole Miss is a playoff team pretty safely. They got to win over East Carolina. That's the team they're competing against for this top of the American. They got to win on the road against Memphis. That was a huge win for them. Memphis was, for a lot of this season, the group of 5 team. Same with South Florida, but Memphis now has 3 losses in conference, so they're essentially done. South Florida at 2 losses as of recording. So, I don't know. Tulane probably has, as long as Tulane wins out, they will be the 12 seed here. So, we'll see this week for Tulane. They're going to be taking on Charlotte. I don't know what was going on with the Tulane graphic there. I had to switch like two things. I think they win against Charlotte nonetheless, though. Charlotte's like the worst team in the American. They're 0-7 in conference right now. Maybe they're probably 0-8 when you guys are recording this. I guess actually they would be 0-7 because Charlotte's playing Georgia, or played Georgia this past week, so that's obviously going to be another loss. Tulane should win this one very easily. I think Tulane very likely gets into the American Conference Championship and enters that game with a chance at the playoffs on the line, which is very fun if you're a Tulane fan. Houston, going to be the number 23 team, moving down one based off of my rankings last week. This is the committee's rankings of last week. Want to stress that enough. Yeah, they play TCU. That actually should be a very close game. Houston was only favored by 1.5 in that one. They got it at home, though. Interesting spot. I'd assume Houston won, but TCU could definitely have made that interesting. Houston's another one of these teams that's not really live. I guess technically they are because they're only one game back of the Big 12, but I'd assume Texas Tech and BYU both handle business, unless BYU would have lost on the road to Cincinnati last week, which I guess is a fair estimation, which then could put Houston in the spot here. But I actually think Houston loses at Baylor. Baylor's a team I've kind of been sneakily high on all year. I think they entered my preseason top 25. I was really high on them. They're only 5-5 right now. I'm not sure who actually Baylor played last week at Arizona, so that could be a loss. They could be 5-6 right now, but I don't know. I kind of like Baylor playing with a chance to make a bowl game. I think Baylor kind of gets a little sneaky win here, and I don't think Houston's honestly playing for all that much. Maybe they are, but I think Baylor wins that one at home. Missouri at Oklahoma probably was a loss last week, unless Ahmad Hardy just got the team on his back, which maybe he could have. He did that against Mississippi State. I still think Missouri's a pretty decent team, however. At Arkansas, I'd assume should be a win, but honestly, there's not much to discuss about Missouri. They're not really alive for anything, playing for much. But I think at this point, they probably finish the season at 8-4, unless they went out and upset Oklahoma, which could be a pretty big win. That would, be of more of an effect for Oklahoma than Missouri, because Missouri, even with that win, even if they win out, they can't get in at 9-3, unfortunately. Illinois is going to be at 21. I was kind of tripping out a little. I had Illinois at 25 last week. I was like, do I really want to rank Illinois? But the committee decided to go one step further. I had them at 25. They put them at 21. At Wisconsin for Illinois, I'm assuming that's a win. This is kind of the same thing with Missouri. Like, it's, Missouri's in the SEC, so they're going to get a little bit of a boost. Illinois is in the Big Ten, very good conference, so they're going to get a little of a boost. But they're not really playing for much here. Versus Northwestern, this should actually be a fun game. Northwestern's kind of a sneakily good team. They run the ball pretty well. I think it's going to be kind of a low-scoring defensive battle, but I think Illinois does squeak it out at home. Should be a fun one, though. Number 20 is going to be Tennessee. Will Tennessee have won at Florida? Again, Tennessee's kind of one of these placeholder teams. They're not really playing for much. Promise we'll get to teams playing for a lot here in just in a second. But Tennessee at Florida, that very well could have been a loss. Tennessee hasn't beat Florida since, 2003, I want to say. So I think I predicted Tennessee to win against Florida. I'd assume, I don't want to say I'd assume, but I think they won. I don't know. They're 3.5-point favorites. I think it's going to be a close game. Two very talented teams. I'll trust Joey Aguilar to have won that game. So assuming Tennessee's 8-3 right now, even then, they're not going to be playing for much, obviously, because they can't get into the playoffs. Home against Vanderbilt, though, I think they'll get up for that game, a little in-state battle. I think they will actually beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's technically a team that could be playing for something. Vandy only has 2 losses right now, so Vandy could potentially be still in the mix, but I think Vandy is just in kind of purgatory up there. They're the lowest ranked 2-loss team of all the. They don't really have much life. They're behind Utah, Miami. USC will jump them if USC wins against Oregon. Vandy's not in a great spot, so I think Tennessee does win this one at home. I'm interested to see the outcome of that Florida game, though. Should be a pretty good one. Virginia, first team that we can actually say, they've played all their games up to this point. So they were on a bye last week, so I can actually just go out and predict this normally. Against Virginia Tech should be a pretty winnable game. This is a rivalry game. It's always hard to win. The ACC is going to be the league that just provides so many rivalry upsets. I feel like I can just sense it already because the ACC has been so crazy. Virginia Tech is 3-7 at this point. They very well could be 3-8. like they play Miami, so I'm assuming they lost last week. So I'm assuming Virginia Tech's 3-8 right now, taking on a 9-2 Virginia team. Maybe Virginia Tech goes in there, gets up for this game, and finds a way to win and spoil Virginia's playoff chances, but I don't really think so. Chandler Morris is playing very well. I think Virginia holds on. I think it could be a close game in the first half, maybe through 3 quarters, but I think Virginia does find a way to pull away. And Virginia, with that win, I think should be in the ACC championship game with a spot for the playoffs on the line. That should be very fun. Whoever Virginia gets, whether it's Georgia Tech, Pitt, SMU, if one of the 2 lost teams can somehow make it in here, I'd assume not. We're getting pretty late in the season, so I don't know if anything too crazy like that happens, but you never know. Maybe the ACC has had some crazy things happen this season. Number 18 is going to be Michigan. Now I'm assuming Michigan won at Maryland, though. Could be a little bit of a sneaky trap game. Michigan's favored by 14.5, so I'd assume they won. I don't know, man. Bryce Underwood's kind of been playing a little bit better. He looked really good against Washington. The stat-wise, he hasn't been all that amazing. Michigan played pretty bad against Northwestern. They found a way to win that game. They had like 5 turnovers. If they play like this against Ohio State, there is no chance they win this game. Now, I think I said this last year at some point, but after Michigan beat Ohio State, when Ohio State was ranked number 1, Michigan was, 5-6? No, they were 6-5 at that point going into that game last year. And after Michigan won, I said, I don't know if I can pick Ohio State to beat Michigan until I see it. Which pains me to say, because I'm an Ohio State fan. And I will say, this game does worry me. Michigan gets it at home. They're going to get up for this game. We know, obviously, they've won 4 of these games in a row. I think Ryan Day knows he needs to win this game. People were calling for his job after he lost the game last year. Now, he did end up winning a national title, so that's kind of gone away. And he, since then, hasn't lost. He's beaten, I want to say 6 top 10 teams since then. So, pretty crazy stuff from him. I think he knows. I think he's got to push all the chips on the table if he wants to win this game. I don't really know how I feel about Sharon Moore as a head coach. Michigan's offense, don't get me wrong, is much better than they were last season. And Michigan found a way to beat Ohio State last season in Columbus. So you could very well make the argument to me. It's just with the way Ohio State's playing, man. They won the national championship last year. They should win this game. They're the better team by far. They won the national championship last year. They're better this year, I'd say, than they were last year. I know Michigan's also better this year. Again, it is in Ann Arbor. It's very worrisome, man. I'm telling you, it is. I think Ohio State is going to find a way. I think they're going to hit on some big plays. I just feel like they have to. As long as Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate are healthy, Ohio State will win this game. Now, if either of them are out, it could be a little interesting. I think it's going to be a close game. It's not going to be a blowout. I'd assume the spread is maybe bigger than this, but the spread last year was 17, and I picked Michigan to cover, and Michigan ended up winning. I'd assume Michigan keeps it close. I think it's going to be kind of a low-scoring game, but I just have trouble with Bryce Underwood, true freshman, playing against this Ohio State defense, best defense in the country. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do it. I got Ohio State winning. I don't feel great about it. It's a very worrisome game, but Ohio State, I feel like this is a must-win game for them. I know it's technically not. They're going to be in the playoffs either way. But, this is a must-win game for Ohio State. They need to win this game. I think they will. Hopefully, I'm praying that they do. Number 17 is going to be Texas. Texas may be the only 3-loss team alive. They're the highest-ranked 3-loss team, so technically I guess there's some life. They're going to need to beat A&M, though, and I don't think they will. I'd assume they beat Arkansas. I just think A&M's playing for much more. I think they're the better team. We saw A&M come back down crazy amount of points against South Carolina. When A&M's clicking, they might be the best team in the country besides Ohio State. When A&M's going, locked in, fully, in stride, they just couldn't be stopped against South Carolina in that second half. And they looked really good. Marcel Reed's been good all season. If Le'Veon Moss comes back, because he's been banged up, A&M just gets another layer of their offense. I promise you, A&M's so good. Texas could win at home. A&M's going to be safely in the playoffs regardless. So Texas could very well win. But even at 9-3, they're going to have to jump teams. They're going to have to get to the top 10 because the ACC and the Group of 5 are going to have 11 and 12. So they're going to have to jump BYU. They're going to have to jump Miami. They're going to have to jump Utah, Vanderbilt, USC, Georgia Tech. Along with one of Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Alabama. They got a lot of work to do. With the amount of 2-loss teams there is, I don't see them getting in, unfortunately. So I think Texas A&M does win that game. For Georgia Tech here, big game against Pitt last week. I'm interested to see what happened. It's so hard to make these videos pre-recorded. For the ACC, though, at the time of this recording, there's 4 teams with 1 loss. SMU is actually the 4th team. They played Louisville last week. Both teams at 7-3 at that time, so that could be an interesting one. SMU could very well be out of this ACC title race. It could become a 3-team race, and I mean, one of Georgia Tech or Pitt will be out of this race as well. So it could very well be just Georgia Tech and Virginia at the top with 1 game left. Could very well be, it could very well be Virginia and Pitt. You never know. Pitt could very well win that game. I picked Georgia Tech to win, but the spread being as small as it was does concern me a little bit. Maybe Pitt has some juice left in the tank. I think Georgia Tech's a little too good, but I mean, you never know. They lost to NC State. They probably should have lost to Boston College. If they had 2 struggle weeks, maybe they'd lost to Pitt there. Against Georgia, Georgia's playing too well, man. I gotta pick Georgia here. I know Georgia Tech was much worse last year than they are this year, and they almost beat Georgia. Maybe should have. 8 overtime game. It was insane. But I just think Georgia's playing so well right now. I think they're playing better right now than they were last year. I think Georgia's is just a train right now. I got to take Georgia here. I posed the scenario, though. What if Georgia Tech ends up beating Pitt, beating Georgia, but then they lose in the ACC title game? Does an 11-2 Georgia Tech get in over a 10-2 Georgia? They'd have 1 more win. They would have had the head-to-head, and neither team would have a conference title. Like, I think they might have to. So Georgia Tech, if they win this Georgia game, they could be alive for an at-large. They probably would end up getting in, I'd assume. But even then, even if they don't win this game, as long as they win the ACC, they will be in. And Haynes King should be a really fun player to see in the playoffs if he does end up getting there. Number 15 is going to be USC. Huge game last week at Oregon. You guys will know who won this game. I'd assume Oregon won. They're at home. Oregon doesn't have a ranked win yet this year. I think this past week was the week they finally got it. This was a really bad matchup for USC. Oregon does a really good job defending the run. Oregon's secondary is really good, so they do a really good job defending the pass. It's kind of USC's bread and butter with Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane. Like, they have a lot of playmakers, and I think Oregon defends it really well. USC kind of struggles to stop the run. Oregon runs the ball very well. Like, all the signs are pointing towards Oregon. So I'd assume Oregon won. But if USC did end up winning that game, they would be ahead of Oregon in these rankings, and USC would probably be in the playoffs with a win over UCLA. So USC still very much alive here. I do think they beat UCLA regardless if they win or lose against Oregon. But yeah, man, USC very much alive. Especially if they won against Oregon, they are likely in the playoffs, folks. So if not, they're not going to be in the playoffs, obviously. So pretty straightforward stuff with USC there. Vanderbilt at 14. Vanderbilt not so straightforward. Probably, I'd assume if they win out, they don't get into the playoffs. Like, they're still behind Utah, Miami. That's not great. Maybe a win at Tennessee pushes them over the hump. Maybe. But I already said this previously. I think Vandy loses this game to Tennessee. I'd assume they beat Kentucky. Like, Vandy's still technically alive. Diego Pavia, he's not going to go down without a fight. Maybe Vandy goes into Tennessee and wins. That could very well happen. Vandy's a solid, capable team. Like I said, they're behind too many teams right now that you could argue maybe they shouldn't be. Like, I have Vandy ahead of Miami and Utah in my own rankings. The committee has them behind, though. So, not a great spot for Vandy, in all honesty. Number 13 is going to be Miami. Me and the committee actually agree on where they should be ranked. We both had them at 13 last week. They played at Virginia Tech. I'm assuming that would be a win. At Pitt, interesting game. Miami could still technically sneak into the ACC championship game, I believe. I think they would need Virginia to lose. They would need Pitt to beat Georgia Tech, but then they would need to beat Pitt this week. And then technically there would be a bunch of 2-loss teams, so it'd be interesting if Miami could kind of backdoor their way in. With Miami, they're just going to need teams ahead of them to lose. Like, they're going to need Utah to lose. Maybe they can jump ahead of Utah. I think they actually might with a win at Virginia Tech and a win at Pitt. And I think they will get these wins, by the way. Like, Miami's a very talented team. Early in the season, we had Miami ranked like number 2 in the country at one point. This was a Miami team that we were so high on. Then they lost to Louisville. Then they lost to SMU. Looked kind of suspect against Stanford. So Miami had the wheels kind of fall off there in the middle. But since then, they've been pretty locked in, pretty solid since. I do think they, like I said, I think they win at Virginia Tech. I think they win at Pitt, although Pitt could very well win that game. Pitt could be playing for a chance of the ACC title game on the line. If Pitt beat Georgia Tech last week, then Pitt would definitely get up for this game, and maybe I'd change my pick to Pitt winning. I just feel like Miami's the better team in all honesty, so I'm going to take Miami even on the road. I think they get that win, and Miami, like I said, could still sneak into the ACC championship game. If they don't, because it is kind of a lot they need to happen. Technically as well, they're still in line for an at-large. They need Alabama to lose against Auburn, which I'll get to, but I think there's a good chance Alabama might lose to Auburn. And if that does happen, and assuming Texas Tech beats BYU, or maybe BYU lost to Cincinnati last week, Miami's still very much alive. Utah would probably get jumped by Miami, I'd assume, and then Miami would be in like a direct competition with Notre Dame for that last spot, man. And that could be very interesting. If Miami's in a direct competition with Notre Dame, both have the same record, Miami's the head-to-head, I'd assume Miami gets in over them. So Miami still very much alive here. We'll see what happens with the Hurricanes. Number 12 is going to be Utah, moving up 3 spots. Like I said with Utah, I'm kind of worried Miami will end up jumping them at some point in the rankings, but the committee seems to love Utah. They're ranked at 12 right now. I'm ranked at 15. So pretty crazy stuff. I'd assume they win against Kansas State. They're a pretty big favorite, and I will assume they win against Kansas. They're just blowing out teams left and right in the Big 12. Like, look at this. Since the BYU game, you could argue Utah probably would have won that game if they were at home. I think Utah might be the overall better team than BYU. Is that crazy? I know BYU won, but Utah looks so good these past 3 weeks. And Utah's only losses are to Texas Tech and BYU. Like, they've blown out literally every other team. Cincinnati was ranked when they played them. I think Arizona State may have been ranked when they played. Like, literally, look at the schedule. Besides their 2 losses, none of their games have been close. So Utah could potentially get in. I think it's a long shot. Maybe if BYU lost to Cincinnati last week, I think I picked BYU to win. I think BYU will win. I think BYU gets it done. But Utah could potentially sneak into an at-large spot. Could be interesting. Could maybe sneak into the Big 12 championship game as well if all things go their way. BYU's in a very interesting spot. They definitely control their own destiny, right? I think, if they beat Cincinnati last week, I think they'll beat UCF. UCF's not worrying me. It's just the Cincinnati game. Could be a little tricky there. On the road, Big 12 conference game. Cincinnati's a very capable team. They've been ranked at certain points in the season. So Cincinnati could have won that game. I think BYU wins that game. I think BYU beats UCF. I think we get a lot of chalk in the Big 12. I think it's just going to be Texas Tech, BYU in the championship game. I do think Texas Tech would win that if that is the case. So that's what I think is going to happen as of right now. But if Cincinnati did beat BYU, that opens up a whole can of worms in the Big 12 because now it's like, who's that team going to play Texas Tech? Is it going to be Utah? Is it Houston? Is it Arizona State? All those teams have 2 losses as of this point. Now I picked Houston to lose. I think Arizona State could maybe still be alive. They played Colorado last week. I picked Houston to lose against Baylor, though. Houston could also have lost to TCU last week, so I don't think it's Houston. I think Houston probably drops one of those last 2 games. Yeah, but if BYU lost to Cincinnati, all of a sudden, Cincinnati's still there with 2 losses, so there's a lot of potential chaos in the Big 12. I do think BYU wins both, and if BYU loses their conference championship game, they're probably not in, so they're going to have to probably run the table. I think they will have to run the table to get in, unless a team ahead of them loses, like Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, something along those lines. Maybe if Oregon loses to USC, but then again, I think USC would probably just replace them in the rankings. So BYU's in a bit of a tricky spot, but if they win out, they should be in. Number 10 is going to be Alabama. They should win against Eastern Illinois. Like, in all honesty, they should win that game. They're not going to lose. I worry about this Auburn game. On the road, night game in Jordan-Hare. Jordan-Hare, Nick Saban's out here saying it's haunted. Like, I don't feel great about it. Auburn just fired their head coach, but we've seen many times this season after a team fires their head coach, they kind of get up for games. All of a sudden, they got some extra energy, extra buzz, extra juice. Like, I don't know, man. This game worries me. I think it wouldn't worry me if Oklahoma didn't just beat Auburn or Alabama the way they did. Like, Oklahoma was just outplayed in that game. If you watched, Alabama just outgained them. They looked like the better team. Oklahoma's forcing turnovers, making plays in special teams, defense. Like, Oklahoma found a way to win that game for their season. I respect I respect them so much for finding a way to win that game. Alabama had it at home too, like just a crazy win for Oklahoma. But Alabama going into this Auburn game will be 9-2 with a chance. I'm not sure how the SEC championship game tiebreaker works, but they're still alive to make the SEC championship game. And Auburn's just sitting there with a home game against their biggest rival, hoping to play spoiler. Last time they were in Jordan-Hare, Jalen Milroe needed a miracle. 4th and 27 it was. They converted 4th and goal from the 27. They converted to win that game. I'll say this. I was going to pick Alabama in this game. I'm taking Auburn, though. Here's why. There's always one of those games, rivalry week, against a playoff team, and they just lose to their rival. The past few years, it's been Ohio State. But there's always one. I'm telling you, there's always one, and this game worries me for Alabama. I think Auburn wins this game, and I think all of a sudden, you look at the collapse Alabama had two of the past 3 games. I think Kalen DeBoer may very well be on the hot seat. Once again, I don't think they'll fire him, just because you look at what they did after the Florida State game till the Oklahoma game. I mean, that was 8 wins in a row against like 5 ranked teams in there, or maybe 4. Like crazy stretch Alabama went on. Now maybe I'm delusional. Maybe Alabama just goes and takes care of business. I'm assuming they're going to be favored. They should be. They're the better team here. So Alabama is very capable of winning this game. If they do win this game, they should be in. Now, if they get into the SEC championship game, what do you do with a 10-3 Alabama? Do you punish them? Do you drop them 1 or 2 spots because they lost that championship game? Or do you just kind of keep them where they're at, not punishing them for playing another game? What if it's a 10-3 Alabama versus, I don't know, say a 10-2 Miami? What if USC beats Oregon, right? What if USC is 10-2, Oregon's 10-2? What if it's between a 10-2 Oregon, a 10-3 Alabama, or even an 11-2 BYU, a 10-3 Alabama? Could be interesting. I think Alabama probably gets in, though, if they just beat Eastern Illinois, which they should. If they beat Auburn, they probably do get in. But I think they lose. I'm picking Auburn in that game. I'm telling you. Number 9 is going to be Notre Dame. I'm assuming they blew out Syracuse. Against Stanford, at Stanford, big rivalry spot. I think Notre Dame knows they need to impress, though, and I think they will. I think they continue to win. The committee, I saw someone talking about this. I forget who it was, but they essentially put up a buffer there between Notre Dame and Miami, putting Alabama behind Notre Dame. Really smart from the committee, by the way, because now they don't have to deal. As long as Alabama takes care of business against Auburn, which, like I said, I don't think they will, which I think the Miami conversation will really heat up if that happens. So the committee, I'd assume, is just praying for Alabama to keep winning, because then they don't have to have the Notre Dame-Miami conversation. And they said that they're right now not in the same 2 tiers, but if they get into the same tier, head-to-head is going to play a factor, which I'd assume if a conversation for the last playoff spot is between Notre Dame and Miami, I'd assume they pick Miami. I'd assume they put Miami in. Now, obviously, I do think Notre Dame, if they played right now, Notre Dame would win. I think Notre Dame's better. I love Jeremiah Love. I love Jadarian Price. C.J. Carr, I think, is amazing, but I don't know. You got to respect the head-to-head. But as long as Notre Dame keeps winning, as long as Miami doesn't just creep up on them, and all of a sudden just become a huge talking point, I think Notre Dame should be fine. They should be fine. Oklahoma, a little bit of a tricky game, a little bit of a tricky final 2 games. They're getting all this hype after beating Tennessee on the road, beating Alabama on the road, 2 games that they could have lost. I think I picked them to lose both those games. They found a way to win, keep their season alive. They could have lost to Missouri. I don't think they will. I think their defense is too good, and I think they slowed down Ahmad Hardy enough to get that win. And then home against LSU. This is still a talented LSU team, but I think LSU is just in the water right now. I think they're in the dumps. I think they're done. I think Oklahoma wins. I think it could be just kind of a low-scoring game. I think it could be a little close, could be a little tricky, but I think Oklahoma does win. And with these 2 wins, I'm assuming they beat Missouri. With these 2 wins, they will be in the playoffs. So good for Oklahoma, man. If you told me Oklahoma would finish the season 10-2, I'd call you crazy. Looking at the schedule at the beginning of the season, it was absurd. People were predicting Oklahoma to go 6-6. By the way, that's how hard we thought this Oklahoma schedule was. And to be honest, it is still a very hard schedule when you look at it top to bottom. Now, obviously, South Carolina, LSU, even Auburn, Missouri weren't as good as we thought they would be, but still, still an incredibly hard schedule. So the Sooners at 10-2 will 100% be in. Oregon, as long as they beat USC, I think they should be fine. To be honest, I think it's interesting. You think if they lost to USC, you'd be like, okay, well, you'd rather have that than lose to Washington because USC is better, so you could chalk that up as being a better loss than the Washington loss necessarily could be. But I kind of think you'd rather lose to Washington. In all honesty, like, I know obviously you're not going to want to hear that as an Oregon fan. Washington's their biggest rival. Washington beat them twice, like 2 years ago. So you're not going to want to hear that, but I think it's kind of true. Like, because if USC did beat Oregon, then all of a sudden you'd have to put USC ahead of Oregon, and Oregon would probably be the first team looking out, or on the outside looking in. And then they need some help to get in, which you wouldn't want as an Oregon fan. If you do beat USC, you take care of that, and then all of a sudden the last spot is between, like, it would be between a 10-2 Oregon, assuming Oregon lost to Washington, and like an 11-1 BYU. Now, if BYU won the Big 12, they'd get in, but if they lost the Big 12 championship game, then it would be 11-2 BYU versus 10-2 Oregon. I think they'd probably end up siding with Oregon in that spot. So, Oregon, in all honesty, I do think they beat USC. So with that win, they should be pretty safely in my opinion, as long as Texas Tech takes care of BYU in the Big 12 championship game. Now, like I said, BYU could have lost to Cincinnati, and all the talk about BYU could just be out of the picture. But I think Oregon should be fine as long as they beat USC. At Washington could be a tricky spot, but they don't have Kalen DeBoer anymore. I know the Washington team's very talented. They got a lot of guys offensively that could cause Oregon some problems. I think it's going to be close because it's on the road. Oregon typically does tend to have a Washington problem. I think it's going to be very close, but I think Oregon squeaks out a win at the very end. And I think they will get into the playoffs because I'm assuming they beat USC. I'm assuming they beat Washington. 11-1 Oregon is 100% in. Number 6, Ole Miss. This is one of those teams that we can just predict because they're on the bye last week, so we don't have to recap anything crazy. I'm worried about Ole Miss for the playoffs just because every single day I feel like I hear something more about Lane Kiffin, and how does that distract these teams? That's what worries me, man. I feel like it's just becoming such a big distraction now. Lane Kiffin has said that he's going to make a decision after the Egg Bowl, so we're going to have to watch what he does there, but, like, man, it worries me. It does worry me. Him and Trinidad Chambliss is just a crazy, like, play caller QB duo. And the fact that that's not going to be, that could potentially not be. I'd assume Lane Kiffin goes to Florida or LSU. I'd assume he does leave. Now, Ole Miss is probably going to match his money, so maybe it makes it interesting for him. But, like, the recruits he's going to get at those other two schools compared to Ole Miss is just going to be such a crazy difference. Like, I think he'd be crazy to say no. At Mississippi State, this could be the team. This could be the team that loses. Like I said, I feel like there's always a playoff team that loses rivalry week. This could be the one, like, at Mississippi State. Mississippi State has been kind of sneakily good. Like, they've held some teams close. I think Ole Miss wins. The fact that Missouri just blew them out with, like, their second-string, third-string QB in, and I don't even remember. Like, Missouri just blew Mississippi State out. I don't know. I think Ole Miss still wins, but this could be the one that, like, if Auburn beats out, or if Alabama beats Auburn, I know this game is technically first, so you'd know the outcome of this one first, but you get what I'm saying. Like, this could be the game that the good team loses just because of its rivalry week. But I think Ole Miss hangs on. I think it's gonna be a very close game though. Texas Tech moving up to for my rankings. They were at 7 in my rankings. I think I had Ole Miss 5, Oregon 6, Texas Tech 7. Switched it around a little for the committee. Texas Tech should take care of business here. I just feel like Texas Tech is such a good team. They're good. I've been saying this all year. They're good not only for the Big 12. But just as a good team in general, they have one of the best defenses in the country. Their front seven is ridiculous. Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker, is legitimately, like, him and Arvell Reese are, like, right there with each other for the best linebacker in the country. I think Texas Tech beats West Virginia, get into the Big 12 championship game. Who will they play? Right now it's BYU, as long as BYU had beaten Cincinnati and take care of business this week. So I'd assume it's Texas Tech BYU. But honestly, with the way the committee is valuing Texas Tech, even if they lose the Big 12 to BYU, I think they probably still get in. So Texas Tech pretty much in at this point for me. Number 4 is going to be Georgia. They just look ridiculous, man. They're going to beat Charlotte last week, and I think with the way they're playing, I can't pick Georgia Tech to win this game. I was making a lot of noise last week about the Georgia Tech comparison if Georgia Tech were to stun and beat Georgia. But the way Georgia looked against Texas, with the way Georgia's, I'm assuming, going to looking at Charlotte, Georgia is just a freight train right now. This is a team I don't want to play. Gunnar Stockton, the whole team's just playing their best ball right now. So I do think they beat Georgia Tech. Number 3 is going to be A&M. I'm assuming A&M beat Samford last week, so at 11-0, they should. I mean, they're essentially locked into the playoffs at this point. At Texas could be a tricky game. They could be a little sleepy. They could be, because they're like, oh, we got into the playoffs, but I think they'll be up for this one. It's still a rivalry game. It is on the road. Texas could maybe make some noise, maybe win. If Texas wins 9-3, maybe they still have a chance to get in. So in Texas's mind, maybe they're still playing for something here. I still think A&M's the much better team, though. I think A&M wins. I think it's a close one. I think Marcel Reed does enough. I think the playmakers, maybe if Le'Veon Moss comes back, if he's healthy, the run game, it's going to be hard for Texas to stop. I know they have a very good defense, but I just trust. Georgia just blew out Texas 35-10. Like, I just can't pick that Texas team. With the way they closed the game, like, I feel like Texas A&M, with the way Texas A&M closed the South Carolina game, and with the way Texas closed the Georgia game, two completely different ends of the spectrum, I just can't pick Texas to win just based off of what I've just seen. So I got to take A&M there. Indiana, coming off a bye this past week. Their previous game was against Wisconsin, where they kind of struggled a little bit. At Purdue should be a win. Purdue's pretty bad. I know it's a rivalry game on the road, but Indiana, even with the loss there, will be into the playoffs, so not much to talk about here with them. And then with Ohio State, I'm assuming they beat Rutgers. There's the noise that Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, both injured. Either way, I'd honestly just sit them against Rutgers. They're going to beat Rutgers either way. Ohio State's running game kind of got going against UCLA. I actually think it will get going against Michigan. I think it's going to be a point of emphasis to get it going. We saw Ohio State kind of get into a little bit of desperation mode. I don't know if I want to call it that because Ohio State was still in control of that Penn State game the whole way through. But, like, when they came out of that second half and just started launching it to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, I was like, whoa, because we hadn't seen that all year at that point. They were playing super conservative all year, just playing behind their defense. And it had been working, so there's no reason to stop. But when they pulled that out against Penn State, it really just opened my eyes. I think we may have to see some of that. I think Michigan and Ohio State could very well be tied at halftime. Maybe Michigan's up like 3 or 4 points or something. And I think Ohio State goes out there in the third quarter. Maybe it's in the fourth quarter if it's still a close game. And they just start letting Julian Sayin unwind. And I think that's going to be the difference maker. I think they're going to get some big plays in the second half. And I think Ohio State will win. It worries me. As an Ohio State fan, this game is always going to worry me. But I do think Ohio State wins. It is on the road. Could be tough. But Bryce Underwood's a true freshman, man. And I just trust this Ohio State defense a little bit too much. I think they're going to turn them over maybe even more than one time, maybe a few times. I think Ohio State gets a win, moves to 12-0, punches their ticket to the Big Ten championship game for the first time in a while. But that's going to do it for the Week 14 college football top 25 rankings. I apologize if it was a little, hard to follow, a little bit confusing, messy. But thank you so much for bearing with me. I didn't really have any other choice. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow with an NFL video. Make sure you check out our college basketball video we posted yesterday, Power 40 Rankings. It's very fun. Make sure you subscribe, turn on the noties if you're new. But once again, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching this one.